As usual, they're online for everybody online. You can get it in the YouTube description box, or you can get it on the app. And I would definitely get it. There's some neat stuff in the notes today that I want you all to see. So, everybody ready? Our opening verse for this morning is going to come out of the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 24 and verses 30 through 32. We're going to read some more of the text than that, but just to start off, verses 30 through 32. Now, this should be really, really familiar to you. We've talked about this, I don't know, over the last, can you believe it's almost, we're going 18 years here. 18 years. For 18 years, we talked about this a lot of times. We're going to talk about it again. Luke chapter 24, verse 30 says, "And it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, he blessed, and having broken, he was giving it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he disappeared from their sight. And they said to each other, 'Was not our heart burning within us as he was speaking to us on the way, and as he was opening the scriptures to us?'" For a few moments this morning, the title and the topic of the message coming right out of that verse is, "Their eyes were opened." Their eyes were open. You guys know the prayer here. If you know it at home, please pray with us. Abba, give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts that are willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen. Amen. Okay. So, like I said, should be familiar ground, familiar scripture. This is, of course, after the resurrection, actually the day that they go to the tomb. And these are the two men walking to the road of Emmaus. You're going to find out in a minute that it's actually Messiah's uncle, Cleopas, and Messiah's brother. We know him as Yaakov, or in most of our Bibles, it's James. These are the two people that are walking with him on the road to Emmaus, and of course he opens up the scripture to them. And they don't know who he is. They don't recognize him until he breaks the bread. And every time I've ever read that, I guess the conclusion most of the time, I think that most people come to, or the conclusion certainly I've, came to a lot of times in reading this is, well, I guess the first question you ask is, why didn't they notice him? Evidently, for some reason, he's hiding who he is to them. But why, when he broke the bread, did they recognize him? Now, my assumption is that at that moment, he appeared in such a way that they recognized. Even though it doesn't actually say that, I'm just assuming. Something happened. Something happened that all of a sudden they realized who he was. And then, of course, they go on to say, our hearts were burning with us the whole time we talked. All right, so keep that in the back of your mind. Just for a couple of minutes, we're going to get back to it. And it's become really important. Hopefully, we'll be able to answer the question as to what actually went on, what actually happened there, and why their eyes were open. Now, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the Zadok priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood, the Zadok priesthood, the Hasmoneans, the people who shouldn't be, the Hasmoneans, the people who shouldn't be inside of the temple, the priests that are there, the abominations that they had done, or really made the temple a den of thieves, as the Master says. We talked about the Pharisees and who they were, their connection to the synagogues, many of the teachers, the rabbis, and yet both of these groups make up what we call the Sanhedrin. Talking about all of that stuff, really in an effort to get to the calendar. That's kind of really been the direction. And of course, we've been talking about the Essenes because they are connected with the sons of Zadok, the people that were in Qumran. And they're not just in Qumran. They're all over. It wasn't just the community in Qumran, though that's where we find, there was a community in Qumran, and that's where eventually the Dead Sea Scrolls are found. They weren't just there. They were everywhere. I'm going to show you today that they were in Jerusalem. There was a community of them living in Jerusalem. But aside from that, why do that? If we can connect the gospel account and a lot of the things that go on in the gospel with them, connected to them, then it's a lot easier to begin to understand the calendar that they use. It gives it more authenticity, more value as you read it and look at it to try to understand it, and then us then try to obey it. So question is, and again, I know this is a little bit of review for everybody. Hopefully you've all been here. We call ourselves, or we've been called, Hebrew roots. Right? Actually, there's a whole bunch of different names. I'm sure we've all had this. Somebody say to you, in fact, somebody just said this online recently. What religion are you guys? How do you answer that question? What religion am I? The answer is I'm not really a religion. I'm a believer in the Messiah. I believe in the death and resurrection of the Son of El. I believe in his ascension. I believe in the forgiveness of sin. I believe he's coming back. And I know there's a whole lot of groups that may believe bits or pieces or parts of that. But religion, no, I don't want to classify myself as that. But we often get classified as Hebrew roots or Torah observant, sometimes even Messianic, though that's not necessarily absolutely true. But anyway, so all of these different groups. It is, I think, from all the stuff we've talked about just over the years that we've been doing this, it is obvious that we all, that meaning modern Christianity, every name, denomination, fellowship there is out there, if we are to trace our roots back, where do they go? To the Hebrews, to the Jews. So when we say Hebrew roots, what should really come to our mind is the idea that really the foundation of our belief, the foundation of who we are, is actually Jewish in its origin, in its foundation. Obviously, most of us are not Jewish. Some of us are. Most of us are Gentiles. We've all been grafted into this wonderful thing that Father is doing. But it's important to know your roots, because when you know your roots, you know where you've come from. And if you know where you've come from, you know where you're going to. And so especially with what we did last week, we talked about the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, the three major groups, the three major religious groups. Now, there's other groups that are there. I was talking to brother yesterday. There's the Zealots, another group, but they're not really a religious group. They're more like a militia. These are the men that were sort of fighting against Rome. Rome would have considered them terrorists, but one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. They would have been considered freedom fighters by the Jews. But the religious sects are Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. So if we were to trace our Hebrew roots, regardless of who we are today, what we understand today, where would we trace our Hebrew roots back to? Number 3 on your notes there, because we've got 3 possibilities. Either we trace our Hebrew roots back to the Sadducees. Remember, the Sadducees were a Greek-inspired aristocracy. They were corrupt. They were the priests of the temple, the ones in charge, Caiaphas, Annas. They were politicians, no doubt. They bought their place. The Messiah calls them thieves, people who enter into the gate another way. When what they were doing would become an abomination. It wasn't just them, it was generations of this. This has been going on for a long, long time, from the Hasmoneans all the way to Rome. They were an abomination. And one of their center, or really, I guess, their contrary beliefs to some of the stuff that we would understand, is that they did not believe in resurrection. They believed when you died, that's it. Just blackness, darkness, you're done, it's over. Can we trace our roots back to them? Would you say that would be a fair analogy, that we are a lot like them? I hope not. I hope not. But they're there. They're a religious sect. The second religious sect are, of course, the Pharisees. Once the temple is destroyed, much of the Sadduceic religion dies off because it's obviously connected to the temple. And Pharisaic Judaism becomes top dog. And it becomes eventually what we know today as rabbinical Judaism. So rabbinical Judaism can absolutely trace their roots to the Pharisees. No doubt. No doubt they can. Can we? Would we say that our roots are connected to the Pharisees? A couple of quick things about Pharisees. They were really self-ordained teachers. There's no instruction anywhere in the Torah for such a sect or group, but they're there. It comes from their time in Babylon, the need for synagogues. They created what the Messiah called a burden, the burden of religion. He says, my yoke is easy, right? It's what he does is light. It'll bring rest to our souls. But he's talking of the difference between what he is bringing to them and the burden that most people are carrying in Pharisaic Judaism of their day, i.e., all of the rules and religion, all the do's and don'ts, which go beyond the Torah. The whole idea of not being able to lift up your bed, the whole idea of not being able to take some grain and roll it in your hand and eat a couple little pieces of grain. All the strict rules and ideas of when you wake up, which foot do you put in your pants first, which is second, do you have two kitchens separated, do you wash your hands so many times prior to eating, do you say a blessing before this and a blessing after that? All of those things are the traditions, and the Messiah clearly speaks to us about the Pharisees, and he says that they worship in vain, teaching instead of the commandments of Father, they teach the commandments and traditions of men, which again becomes a burden upon the people. One of the core foundations was that salvation, deliverance, was by the efforts of the Torah. And by Torah, they didn't just mean Torah, they meant all the traditions that they connected to the Torah. That's how one attains salvation. We would call it salvation by works, by effort. So and just real quick question, do we gain salvation by keeping the Torah? Anybody? No. Do we keep the Torah? Yes, but we do not do it to earn right standing with Father. We keep Father's instructions as best we could, as much as we understand, as much as applies to you. We keep it because we have deliverance. Very, very different. I know it sounds like semantics. It's not. It's a big, big difference. So salvation was by the efforts of the Torah. They did believe in resurrection. So there's a plus. That's a connection to us. You could say, yeah, we absolutely believe in resurrection. But they also did not really hold in high regard or amongst their own the idea of revelation from Elohim continuing. Meaning their concept was that since the days of Malachi, Father had not given revelation. It was that was about the last time Father really spoke to us. They're waiting for Messiah, no doubt, but they didn't believe in the concept of or didn't hold in high regard, questioned and tested anyone who would say that they were a prophet, what we would call gifts of the Spirit, miracles and prophecy and wisdom and all those other things. They were much more a textual belief. And I heard somebody, a teacher put it this way: if you want to think about Pharisees in a modern sort of sense, they were the equivalent of like Baptists today, Southern Baptists today. They believe in the Word, but if you ask most of the doctrine that they hold, they also believe the time of revelation, the time of prophecy, the time of prophets, the time of gifts of healing, all of that has passed. That's it. They believe in it. They know what happened, but it's past. It's not for this age. Very similar, just to put a sort of definition around it that we can maybe relate to. So, but they do believe in resurrection. So can we trace our roots back to them? Well, I guess you could say resurrection, that's one thing we certainly have in common, the concept of the idea of resurrection. But what about all the other stuff? Some of the core issues here. Do we believe in traditions overtaking what Father's Word says? Now, I know you could probably say, well, yeah, some probably do, and they do. I'm talking about us. Is that something that we would say, okay, yes, we connect with the Pharisees because we're doing the same things they did? I hope not, because Messiah didn't say some really good things about them. And I want, when Messiah speaks about us, to say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. All right. So the last group there is the Essenes. And of course, this is not exhaustive. I'm just giving you some basic stuff. These Essenes were led, their communities were led by Zadok priest, the ones scattered after the situation with Greece, taking over the temple. They moved to Qumran and to lots of other places as well. They led their communities. They defined themselves according to Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 3 as a voice in the desert making straight the path, the way for Yah to come. That's how they defined themselves. They did believe that when the Mashiach comes, that he would remove sin. That's not something Pharisees believed. The Essenes did believe that when the Messiah would come, he would remove sin in accordance with the teaching of Jubilees. We'll talk about that another time. They did believe that when the Messiah came, he would be a priest king like Melchizedek. And they believed in a life of holiness. They did believe in resurrection. And they believed in the continuing revelation of Yah. That Father wasn't done speaking. That Father still calls prophets. That there are still miracles and healings and manifestations of the Spirit. And without the Spirit, we can't really know or understand or do anything. So out of these three groups, number one, which one are we? I'm not saying that's who we are, but I'm saying which one are we closest to? If we have a Hebrew root, which one of these three sections of root do we actually stem from? I would say Essenes. It's much, much closer to, and we're going to realize how incredibly close it really is. There are all these people who are waiting for a Messiah. They all have different definitions of what he is, but the definitions of the Zadoks is a lot closer to what we are. Now, I'm not saying in any means that Messiah was a Qumran community person. I don't think so. I think Messiah is Messiah. But I think the things he teaches more closely connect with this group of people. And if it does, and we can see, if we see in all the things that we've been doing and what we're still going to do today and in the days to come, that there is a direct connection. My theory, and not just mine, a lot of people's theory, is that a good majority of the first century believers came out of the Essene community. It would have been easier for them to recognize a Messiah that they were already looking for and does the things that they already thought he was going to do, as opposed to a Sadduceic sect who was willing to kill him and a Pharisaic sect that was willing to kill him. I'm not saying Pharisees didn't come to salvation. I'm not saying Pharisees didn't come. We know Nicodemus does open up his eyes. So that's obvious. But on the majority, which one of these are closest to a root, a Hebrew root for us? I would say Essenes are. Okay, so with that, this is really just kind of, I guess, review. Excuse me, guys, it's a little hot up here. Number 4 on your notes. This is we talked about Josephus last week. We talked about Pliny. We talked about the historians of that day. Here's just a piece of Josephus. Now he never mentions a specific location for the people that are called the Essenes, the holy people. Just mentions that they're there. I think later on Philo mentions that they don't necessarily always live in cities. They rather live in towns. They're spread out. But there's obviously a community there at the Dead Sea at Qumran. So Josephus doesn't necessarily mention a specific location. Does mention that they settled throughout Israel, and he mentions that there is an Essene gate in Jerusalem, meaning an Essene quarter. So not only did they live in Qumran and probably lots of other towns, but that there was a community of Essenes in Jerusalem. Today, when you go to Israel, you've got the Armenian quarter, you've got the Jewish quarter, you've got the Islamic, the Muslim quarter, and we call them that because the predominant group of people that are settled in that particular area, the city, so the city's divided up, each group is different from one another. And the Essenes, in similar fashion, there was an Essene quarter, a place in Jerusalem a big city by its standards of its day, where people of the community of the Achad or Yahad are living in the days of Messiah. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the southernmost wall that encompassed the upper and lower city of the Ophel, it started at Ibius and ran south to the gate of the Essenes. There's actually a gate to enter into that part of the city where the majority of people living there are Essenes, at the southwest corner of the city. Here's just a quote from an article from the Israeli Institute of Biblical Studies. It is said that Caiaphas lived in the Essene quarter, close to the temple, also where the upper room was, where the Last Supper had taken place. Did you catch that? Where was the upper room? In the Essene quarter. Here's just a couple of pictures. I know this doesn't come out on your notes. It doesn't print out that way, but you can see the pictures up there. That's the actual Essene gate. It's been unearthed. They know what it is, and so there it is. There's a picture of it. Obviously, it's covered up. The true depth of it is covered up. The land has been filled in over the years of erosion and everything else. But there it is on one side is the actual Essene gate, and the map next to it. Now I put a little. There's a little circle. There's a little purple circle around there. I don't know if you guys can see from where you are, but all the way down there, as it says in the Jewish Encyclopedia, on the southernmost wall was the gate of the Essenes. And you can, if hopefully you can see it from where you are, if you're watching it at home or on your phones, you could see it. It says that's the Essene quarter, and then it highlights Caiaphas's house and also the place of the upper room. So this isn't off the wall stuff that nobody has thought of or recognized before. I'm just showing it. So think about this. The Passover, when they go into Jerusalem and they go to set up the Passover, where do they set it up? In the Essene quarter. Now, we're not told that when we're reading the gospel. Here we are all these years later putting all of these pieces together. According to Josephus, I'm on number 6 now on your notes. According to Josephus, in describing the Essenes, many of them did not marry. It doesn't mean all of them did not marry, but many of them did not marry. They chose to be eunuchs or celibate by choice in order that they could serve Father. That was their choice. It was a conscious choice made by them. Many of the Essenes were celibate. Again, not all of them. They've been around, for 175 years. By the time Messiah comes, obviously, they're having families, they're making babies, they're bringing in children, they're in different areas, and including Jerusalem. Here's Matthew chapter 19. Listen to the words of the Messiah. Do these sound like the beliefs of the Essenes? And he said to them, not all receive this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were so born from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it. I didn't receive it. I'm married. Many of these people were not. Not all of them, but this was a belief amongst the Essenes. This is also instruction that we get from Messiah. Not saying he's an Essene, I'm saying, my goodness, that's very, very similar. Not just similar, it's the same. Saul tells us the same thing. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 8, and speaking about marriage, giving some advice to that local congregation about marriage, he says, I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain as I am. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with lust. So is Saul saying the same thing Messiah said? Yeah, not everybody can receive it, but if you can receive it and give yourself wholly to the service of Father, well, that's a good thing. And so what winds up happening as history goes on, this becomes the standard once Catholicism comes on, eventually, not at first, but later on down the road. All men and women within the Catholic Christian religion, the leadership of it are what? Or they're supposed to be. They aren't, but they're supposed to be celibate. They have made themselves eunuchs because of some of this instruction, other things as well. But could they point to something and say, yeah, this is why we do it? Well, they could absolutely point to that and say, yes, this is why we do it. Well, who said this before? Messiah said it. The Essenes did. The sons of Zadok did. And some did, and some did not. Why is this important? So, in John chapter 4 and verse 7, the Messiah goes to Samaria, and he meets the woman at the well, right? We all know the story. He meets the woman at the well. She's there getting water. And instead of he himself letting down the bucket and drawing up water for himself, what does he do? He asked her to do it. Would you give me a drink of water? And then, of course, the whole conversation ensues. They go back and forth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you have to read some commentary on this. Why is this woman at the water well, probably sometime towards the middle of the day, by herself? Because that's not normally the time that you go to get water. When do you get water? At least, in that day, you can't just turn the faucet on and water comes out. You got it probably early in the morning, so you had enough water for whatever it was that you had to do for the day. The question is, whose job was it to get the water? Now, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this. It was woman's work. That's what the women did. That's what the moms, the sisters, and the wives did. That was their job. I mean, guys obviously had other jobs to do, but that would be considered woman's work. And so we see this throughout the stories. I mean, going all the way back to Moses. Where does Moses meet Zipporah? At the well when she's what? Getting water for the sheep. She's tending the sheep. She's the one getting the water. Later on, when Jacob meets Rebecca, what is she doing? Getting water. And Abraham's servant comes up, doesn't get off of his camel, doesn't start taking the water and putting it, for his camels. What does he do? Well, he prayed. He said, whatever woman does this, she's the gal. But he prays, whatever woman does this. Why? Because it's woman's work. It was part of their job description in that day. So, here's Luke chapter 22, verse 8. As they're coming to Jerusalem, the day Messiah rides in, they're getting, it's after that. It's the actual day setting up the Passover. And the master sends his disciples into Jerusalem to go find a place to have the Passover. We now know, because of archaeology, the map we just saw, where is the upper room that they wind up staying in? In the Essene quarter. So he sends them into Jerusalem, and he says, he sent Kepha and Yochanan, Peter and John, saying, go and prepare a Passover for us to eat. And they said to him, where do you wish us to prepare? And he said to them, see, as you enter into the city, a man shall meet you carrying a jar of water. Follow him into the house he enters, and you shall say to the master of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I might eat the Passover with my taught ones? And he shall show you a large furnished room. Prepare it there. And going, they found it as he had said to them, and they prepared the Passover. So think about this for a second. You're going to go into Jerusalem. Now, let's make believe we don't know that they wind up going to the Essene quarter. They're just going to go into Jerusalem. More than likely, they probably wind up going into the Essene gate to get into the Essene quarter, but let's say they went in some other way. And he says, I want you to walk around Jerusalem until you find a man carrying a water pot. Now think about how many people are in Jerusalem for the Passover. 1 million, 2 million people in Jerusalem. What's the probability you're going to bump into a guy that's the right guy carrying a thing? Well, actually, what's the possibility you're going to bump into a guy anywhere in Jerusalem carrying water? Very, very slim. Why? It's woman's work. So you would see women walking back and forth carrying jugs of water, but not men doing that. So now we narrow this down. This is very unique now. Now we know why the master says this. So I want you to go into Jerusalem, and when you see a man carrying the water, that's different. Go to him, and of course do everything else, set everything up as to for the Passover. So this is from the book Unlocking the Scriptures by Julia Plum. I'm going to put out a whole list of a whole bunch of different books that you guys can get for yourselves. You can order them on Amazon. You can maybe get the digital copies if you want. And you can read some of this stuff on the Essenes, on the similarities in the culture and the people of the way, the Netzarim, all of that stuff. But I'm just giving you little clips of it. So here's a book by a woman named Julia Plum called Unlocking the Scriptures. And in a portion of it, it's a lot more than this. She says, a man carrying a water jar could only have been an Essene. From Yeshua's words to his disciples, they understood where to enter Jerusalem. So why would an Essene be carrying water? He's a single guy. He's a single guy. He doesn't have a wife, sister, mom. He's on his own. But he's part of the community. And he's got to fend for himself. You wouldn't see Pharisees doing this. You wouldn't see Sadducees doing this. But in the scene, you would see. So there's a spiritual lesson here. Like everything the master says, it's not just what he says, right? There's always depth behind what he says. All the time. There's always depth. So they're heading to Jerusalem for what will become the Passover. The last time that he eats the Passover with them, tells them, of course, I'm not going to eat it with you again until we eat it afresh in the kingdom. Which means in the kingdom, what are we going to be celebrating? Passover, right? So he tells them we're not going to eat it until we get into the kingdom. But they eat the Passover together. That night, he's going to be arrested. He's going to be flogged, beaten, mock trial, the whole whipping, the flogging, all of that. He's going to be nailed to a cross, humiliated. He's going to die. Does the master know this? Of course he does. Of course he knows this. And so he's setting them up as they're going into Jerusalem, and he tells them to go find who? A man carrying water. Just let your mind roll with that for a second. What is water? Throughout the texts, it's always a symbol of Yah's word. He washes us with the water of the word. So I'm just saying this is just a spiritual application. I'm looking deeper into this than just, okay, they found a guy with a thing of water. What guy did they find? More than likely, an Essene carrying water. When the master will be gone from them, where does the water come from? That's something to think about. Spiritual lesson. Is he doing it? I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. That's just me. If that clicks, it clicks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I think it's interesting. So they prepare the master's Passover, and actually, the Messiah is not the master of that house. Somebody else is the master of the house, right? We just read this. It says, go to the master of the house and have them set up the whole Pesach for us. So here's a portion of from the Dead Sea Scrolls, from the rules of the congregation, a belief that was unique to the Essenes. This is not a Pharisaic belief. This is not a Sadduceic belief. This is an Essene belief concerning the Messiah. The rule of the congregation, this is number 8 on your notes. The rule of the congregation in the Dead Sea Scrolls describes when the communal meal is eaten. So when you sit down with a whole bunch of people, right? You have a whole bunch of people over your house, you sit down, there are rules on how to do this. There's also rules in the Talmud. I'll share that with you in a second. There's also rules in the Talmud, but they're not in the same context as the rules in the community of the Essenes. And so it says, when a communal meal is held, which is when at least 10 men gather together. This passage is found in 1Q28a of the community scroll. You could look this up yourself. The rule of the congregation states that the communal meal is held when at least 10 men gather together, 1. The meal is held with the heads of the congregation and the wise men sitting in their dignity, in their order of importance. Now think for a second. Think of the Last Supper. How many men are there? Are there 10 men there? Yes. And they all sit according to their dignity. This is a communal meal that's about to happen. Normally, the priest blesses the first fruits of the bread and wine. That's a temple thing. Here is an Essene concept. Their belief was that the Messiah of Israel will extend his hand over the bread, meaning that even though he may not be the master of the house, you'll know he's Messiah when instead of the master of the house grabbing the bread to say the blessing, which is the normal etiquette way of doing it, the Messiah would reach for it first. And he would break the bread and say the blessing over it. The congregation blesses each in order of their dignity. The meal is only for those who are ritually pure. Well, the Messiah takes a bucket of water, takes a towel, wraps it around himself, and he says, you are all clean. You're all clean, except one who's a devil, and he's gone already. But you are all clean. You don't need that I have to clean you again. You're ritually pure, but you need to be washed. You're bathed already, but you need to be washed. So does the upper room fit the parameters of the Essene, at least the Essene concept of this communal meal? And here's the thing, to them, this is the Essenes, the meal is a reenactment of the messianic banquet that the sectarians, meaning the Essenes, expected at the end of days. It was their belief, this is what Messiah will do at the end of days. And they're absolutely correct. Because when Messiah does this on Passover, it is the end of days. It's not the last day, but it is the end of days. Peter says it, Messiah says it, in these last days. So it's not the end, but it's the beginning of all of these things, and it is going to be the end of the temple. An entire era is about to end. And so they're thinking way off when Messiah comes. We would probably maybe relate to that more like the wedding supper of the Lamb. That at the wedding supper of the Lamb, we'll all be seated there. And if any one of us goes and grabs the bread to bless it, what would that be? Out of order. The master of the table, the Messiah, will be the one to grab the bread, break it, and bless it. It's important that you realize this is an Essene concept. This is not a Pharisaic concept. It's not a Sadduceic concept. This is an Essene concept. So, on that day of Passover, number 9 on your notes, they've already gone into the city, the Essene quarter. They already met a guy who was carrying water, more than likely an Essene. They now go to the upper room where we now know was in the Essene quarter, and they have Passover, and Messiah at the end of the supper, here goes Luke chapter 22, verse 19, and taking the bread, giving thanks. Wait a minute, Whose job is that? Whoever the master of that house is. And yet, who's doing it? The master, the Mashiach, the Messiah. And taking bread, giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Likewise, the cup also after supper, saying, "This cup is the renewed covenant in my blood, which is shed for you." Here's Matthew 26, verse 26, same rendition, but a little bit more information. And as they were eating, Yahushua took bread, and having blessed, broke it and gave it to the taught ones and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And taking the cup and giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood, that of the renewed covenant, which is shed for many for the forgiveness of sins." So, did Messiah act? I'm not saying he's mimicking what the Essenes says, but is he doing what the Essenes believed Messiah would do when he comes? Yeah, he absolutely is. And if any one of the disciples are Essenes connected to them in any way, and he does this, what are you thinking? Well, you already know because you already made the confession about a month earlier. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living El. They already believe that. Here's a confirmation of it, if you understand the Hebrew root that leads us back to the Essenes. In the Babylonian Talmud, in Berakoth 46, it says, the Babylonian Talmud states that the host should break the bread. Anyone else does it, it would be what we would consider that very impolite, right? You're out of order. You're doing something. It'd be disrespectful to do that out of order. The Essenes, they believed the authority to bless the bread first belonged to the Messiah as a sign and a claim of authority. So, were they right? Yeah, maybe they got the time. They didn't understand the time, but were they right in the concept? Yeah, listen, was Isaiah right? Would he be a lamb led to the slaughter who won't say a thing, who will die with the transgressors, who will be exalted? Was Isaiah right? Did Isaiah know the time? No, but Isaiah was right. He was right. So here we've got, is there still prophecy in that time of 400 years when we're told, oh, Father doesn't speak to us anymore? Well, while the Pharisees weren't being spoken to and the Sadducees weren't being spoken to, who was being spoken to? Obviously, they understood some things others didn't quite get yet. And so if you're in a scene, even out of Qumran or there in the community or anywhere else, and you hear about this person who you already heard walks on water, feeds thousands, heals the sick, casts out demons, all signs and wonderful proofs of his authority. And then you hear at the Passover, he reached forward and he grabbed the bread. What are you thinking as in a scene? You're looking at your prophecy list and you're going, check, 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 oh, check, 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 check. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. Aside from the fact he rises 3 days later, this is him. This is the one. So would it be more, I'm just asking you to use maybe your own common sense, your own thinking. Seeing these things, knowing these things, what group of people would more quickly come to faith in him than people of Pharisaic or Sadduceic background? The Essenes would, because it's checking all the boxes. They would have looked at this as, this is it. This is the one. Okay, so let's get back to where we started off with today. Luke chapter 24. This is number 10 on your notes. And we're going to read a little bit more than we read in our opening text. Again, this is Cleopas and Jacob. James for those with NKJVs and stuff like that. But it's the Messiah's brother and his uncle that he's talking to on the road to Emmaus. This is the day that they find the tomb empty. And I didn't even include it in the conversation, but they're all downtrodden. The Messiah walks up to them and says, why do you guys look so glum? And they begin to tell him about all the things that just transpired in Jerusalem. And at the end they say, and we thought that he would be the one. But he died. And now we're hearing all this stuff coming out of Jerusalem. They don't know what to believe, what to think. So Messiah says to them, verse 25, and he said to them, O thoughtless ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he was explaining to them in all the scriptures the matters concerning himself. So starts with probably, the seed that's going to come for Adam and Eve in Genesis. The seed that's coming goes from there to Abraham, and the son that's given to Abraham, a son of promise, who's dead as far as his father's eyes are concerned for 3 days. And on the third day, he raises up and a ram is caught in a thicket. And he goes from there, from Abraham to the Passover. And he just story after story after story as they're walking on this road, explaining to them all of these amazing prophecies that said this had to happen. Just like Isaiah said, he would be scourged, he would be humiliated, he'd be spat upon, he'd give his back to the smiters, they pluck out his beard. Didn't Messiah have to suffer all these things? Isaiah also says, but he will also be exalted. In one sentence he says he's going to be abased, in the other sentence he says he's going to be exalted. Didn't these things have to happen, that he would be abased in order for the Messiah to be? So he's going through all the books. Man, what an incredible Bible study that must have been. I wish somebody would have had a cell phone, recorded it. What a Bible study that must have been. And so he just zips through all of it, correcting them to try to lift them up and explain to them what this whole thing is really about. So, verse 28. And they approached the village where they were going. And he seemed to be going on. So they get to Emmaus. And obviously, I think the master's playing them here. So they turn into the road to go there. And the master keeps doing what? Like, I'm just going to keep walking. I'm just going to keep going. So their response is, but they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day has declined. So they're inviting him to stay the evening and eat with us. So when they sit down at that table to eat, who is the master of that table? It's either Cleopas, or it's Jacob, or it's James. They're the ones that invited him in, right? So if you're invited to someone's house, there's a certain etiquette you have to have in someone's house. And if you went to their house and you grabbed the bread before they did, and you gave the blessing before they did, just in a general cultural sense, what would that be? Out of order. It'd be wrong. It'd be disrespectful. So they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us, for it is on toward evening, and the day has declined. And he went in to stay with them, and it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, I'm just going to put the PDP in there, first. Either this is a really, really bad moment, or this is a really, really good moment. He blessed it, and having broken, he was giving it to them. And what happens? Their eyes were open. Now, again, you could say, well, in that moment, they actually saw his visions of who he, all right, maybe, possibly. It doesn't actually say that, but I can get the assumption. I can get alongside that assumption. But I think what's really happening here is that these men are aware of the prophecy of the way the Essenes have described the Mashiach, who takes the bread first. And he just finished going through a Bible study from Genesis all the way to Chronicles or Malachi, whatever version you've got. Just went through the whole thing telling them, and then he grabs the bread. What do you think? Right off the bat. Poof. He's gone. And their eyes were open. This is not Pharisaic tradition. This is not Sadduceic tradition. This is the gospel. This is the account. And you can see the Hebrew roots of the people who are called Zadok priests. And we don't have time to get into it today, but I'll share some more stuff with their prophets. They believed in prophets. Do you know there was actually Essenes on the council, on the Sanhedrin? One of the most famous ones, next to Hillel. The second one, Menachem, was right next to him. They were together after all of this happens. He was loved by Herod. He was a prophet who led a school of prophets. He also happens to be the one who lays hands on Paul and Barnabas. And Essene from the Sanhedrin is the one who lays hands on Saul and Barnabas? Wait a minute, what was he then? A believer. And we'll talk more about that another time. That's pretty neat. All of a sudden, you start looking and say, it makes a lot more sense that our roots are there than anywhere else. And there's so many other things as far as what they believe we can go through, from not just the whole idea of being celibate, the whole idea of judgment, the whole idea of resurrection, the whole idea of not taking an oath. All of these things are found in the community notes. These are teachings Messiah gives. So here's number 11. So are we connecting ourselves, or can we make the connection, our Hebrew root, to the Pharisees or to the Essene? More so to the Essene, for sure, more so. Again, they believed in resurrection, but so did the Pharisees. The Pharisees, with all the other stuff they believed, but they did believe in resurrection. So there's a commonality there, at least in that point. So yeah, you would know why Pharisees would also believe. But when they believed in the Messiah, they'd have to learn things all over from Saul and from the other apostles who taught. In Acts chapter 24, Saul is standing in front of Felix. He's giving account for the riot that occurred. And when he gives account to Stephen, now he gave account another place. He went before the council, before the high priest, and he sees that the council's full of Pharisees and Sadducees. And he calls out to get the Pharisees on his side, and he says, listen, I'm here for the defense of the resurrection. All the Pharisees join him on his side, because the Pharisees and Sadducees, they were at odds with each other with this particular doctrinal point. So Saul sort of splits the room. And we know Saul was a Pharisee. We know he studied under Gamaliel. We know he was more than likely, we know he was part of the Sanhedrin himself. The whole concept of him standing there holding on to Stephen's clothes. He wasn't holding on to Stephen's clothes. That's what the person in the Sanhedrin did. I forgot what the technical name is. I'll give it to you next week. There's a thing, a cloth that the representative of the Sanhedrin holds at a stoning. That's what he was holding. You got to know a little bit of, the Hebrew culture. I guess a Gentile sort of translated that and just, he was just holding the clothes. He wasn't holding the clothes. It shows us who he was. He worked for the Sanhedrin. He got the authority to go out to Damascus. Now the question is, which Damascus did he go to? It's very possible, probable that he went to the one in Syria, that Damascus. Very, very possible that he went there. But do you know what the Qumran community was called? Damascus. They were also called Damascus. So where is he actually going to snatch up all these people of the way who are believers in the Messiah? I don't know. Just putting it out there. Just think about that. So now he's giving testimony. Now he is a believer. Now he's definitely part of those who believe in the Mashiach. So is he more Sadducee? Well, he never was. Is he more Pharisee? Well, he absolutely was, right? He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was part of the clique. He was part of them. What is he now? Acts chapter 24, verse 5. They're giving just the account of where they found Saul. For having found this man, for having found this man a plague, who stirs up dissension among all the Yehudim throughout all the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, the Netzarim. And I'll do the technical stuff another time, but there's a difference between calling somebody that you are from Nazareth and calling someone a Nazarene. Two different things. We'll talk about that later. But these people would call themselves the righteous branches or the righteous sect. Because what is a sect? It is a branch. It's something that's branched off. They are the Netzarim, the righteous branches. What are we? I am the vine. You are the Netzarim. You are the righteous branches. So he says he's the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Verse 14, we're skipping some verses just to get to the meat of this. And so Saul gives his testimony, and look what he confesses. They say all sorts of things about him. He says, but listen, this is what I'm going to confess to. And this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect. Who calls the way a sect? Pharisees and Sadducees. The Jews he's talking about, back at the temple where this whole riot took place. Which they call a sect, so I worship the Elohim of my fathers, believing all that has been written in the Torah and in the prophets. Look at this. Having an expectation in Elohim, which they themselves also wait for. So what's the expectation in Elohim that they also hold? That there is to be a resurrection of the dead, both of the righteous and the unrighteous. So who's the they Saul's talking about? The Pharisees. But he's not connecting himself with them. Again, listen to the wording. Having an expectation in Elohim, which they, meaning they also, these other people, the Pharisees, themselves are also waiting for. Because the Sadducees were not waiting for that. They believed you died, that's it. But the Pharisees would have believed. What is he not connecting himself with here? Pharisees. He's being connected with this third sect. That there is to be a resurrection of the dead, both of the righteous and the unrighteous. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the community rule, the war rule, and the Damascus document all mention immortality, life, judgment of the righteous and the unrighteous. The scroll also suggests that the Essenes believed in the immortality of the soul, that the body, this body, is corruptible. These are the words right out of the scroll. They believe the body is corruptible, but that which is us is eternal. It lives on. The body will be destroyed, but that which is us lives on. What does Saul tell us in 1 Corinthians about the resurrection? What is this body? Corruptible. And it must be changed, made incorruptible. Well, who said it way before Saul said it? The Essene community did. And that's found in the community scroll, IQS. You can find the idea of rewards, the crown of glory, and the robes of honor to be received. Well, wait a minute. Where do we get that from? Book of Revelation, chapter 19, the first resurrection. And the master's bride has made herself ready, and she has been adorned with a white gown, a robe of glory. That's from the Essenes. And yet that's Book of Revelation. That's John telling us that. Again, that's in the community scrolls. 1QS, you guys can look this stuff up. It's available out there. So, one more time. Are we more closely related to Sadducees? Are we more closely related to Pharisees? Judaism is. Direct relationship. is there another line of Judaism that is our Hebrew root? Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think the Zadok priest had it right, and they were spot on with a lot of things as the prophets of their day. And Messiah winds up fulfilling them and teaching them to all three sects, because he came for the whole house of Israel and for the nations, which is what Isaiah tells us way back when. This story is getting really, really incredible. Again, I'm not telling you the master lived in Qumran. I'm not telling you he was in a scene. I'm not telling you anything. He's the master. He was the master. But who gave the Essenes this knowledge to come up with these ideas, to write these things down that just so happen to be the things Messiah teaches when he's here, the things he does? You know what we call that? Prophecy. It's prophecy. The gifts aren't dead. So if the Pharisees are sort of the Baptist of their day, that makes the Essenes the Pentecostals of their day. They're all about gifts. They're all about spirits. They're all about prophecy. They're all about wisdom. They're all about knowledge. Two different groups. And yet we have our roots in the Hebrew root. It's just you got to pick which one. I only see one. I only see one. That is Abba's word for you guys for this morning. So this is inching us closer and closer and closer, to the idea and the concept of the calendar, because not only did the Dead Sea Scrolls or the community notes and all this stuff, not only was all of this information in there, but the calendar was in there too. So if there's validity to these things, there's validity to more. And we need discernment to try to figure out which, how, why. And we'll get more into that later. So hopefully that was interesting for you. Hopefully it's thinking about things. But now does it make more sense why breaking bread would all of a sudden open their eyes? They were like, uh-oh. I'm sure they probably went to go say something and he's gone. He had no intention of staying there that night. His whole purpose was to do that. To break the bread so that they would see it. This is our Hebrew heritage. Abba, we love you. We love your word. We love, Father God, that you are in charge of all things and that you remain the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that you still raise up men and women to prophesy, to speak. You still pour out your gifts. You still give wisdom. You still give understanding. We believe all of those things, Abba. Father, continue to do it as we draw closer to the day when we will eat and drink of the bread and the cup again with the Mashiach in the kingdom. That is our desire. We ask this, of course, in his name, and we say amen and amen. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope that you enjoyed that. Download the notes. Check us out Monday morning for our morning manna and all the other things going on throughout the week. Have an awesome rest of the day. Say it with me, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.